Hey guys, welcome back. So for this one, we are getting into Ultimate Invasion, which is not exactly the return of the 1610 universe, but nonetheless, it looks like Jonathan Hickman is tossing us a bit of a curveball. But he's good at those, so I'm excited to see where this goes. And also, there's a lot of thoughts that I want to share about this one. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so when we jump in, we begin with what appears to be a heist, with us seeing this group of four geared up and hopping out of this white van, and as they make their way in, two of these guys are having this back and forth, with it sounding like one of them knows the plan inside out, and the other guy just kinda got yanked in at the last minute, cause the leader of this group just told the new guy that they're going in through the front door, which sounds like the dumbest plan ever until the new guy sees the leader firing this high-tech gun, and all the returning fire bouncing off of a shield that's being produced by his gear. So right away, we're being shown just like the new guy. Somebody's backing these dudes with some insane technology. And to take it a step further, the main dude out of this crew, he throws a black hole grenade, which sucks up a bunch of turrets just before it collapses on itself. To where next, they split up to find someone with a key card. And the new guy ends up finding this lady and taking hers, while the leader, he's asking this other dude who has a key card as well. And the guy asks, what does he think he's doing? What is it that you want? And the group leader steps away saying $1 billion, which right away confuses this guy because he's like, this isn't a bank. And in response, the team leader says, we know, and he just pops the guy. But as the crew goes on to enter the elevator, the new guy's then like, wait, because he didn't know the payout was $1 billion. So he's like, hey, shouldn't I be getting a quarter of that? But the team leader's just like, dude, you ain't finding the job, you ain't playing the job, you agreed to 10 mil yesterday, and that's all you getting. And I can't help but to imagine that one of the other two, the two who know what to do here, are just listening to these numbers like, wait a minute. But at this point, they've made it to the container that they're looking for, and they type in the code to unlock it, which just happens to be 1610. And when I saw that, I was like, man, who is the guy that works here that came up with that number for the combination? Like, that dude wouldn't even try. But as the crew makes their way inside, we quickly find that their mission was to come here and break out the Maker, the diabolical Reed Richards of Earth 1610. Who's a guy that we haven't seen for quite some time, because the last time that we talked about the Maker was during Venom Beyond, when he took an accidental trip over to Earth 1610, which has me thinking that there's gotta be a story later on that bridges that moment over to this one, because as it stands, we still need the story of how he got here. However, with this team doing their job, with getting to the Maker to break him out, they give him his clothes, and the Maker's like, okay, first things first. And the leader of this group is like, yeah, first thing, where's our money? And the Maker responds with this very cryptic statement, with him saying that it's where all money is, floating in the ether, awaiting summons from an imaginary state to a more believable fiction. And with hearing that, right away, group leader is like, man, I sound like he ain't got it. And to him, it doesn't make sense that this guy could do all these things from prison, but he couldn't get himself out. But for the Maker, it's not so much about breaking out of this prison, but rather he needs to get out of here without people knowing that he's gone, not until he's ready for them to know. But with saying this, the Maker goes on to tinker with this device, while going on to mention, during the time that he was locked up here, he had been seeing a number of therapists in rotation, and over the course of 37 sessions, he was eventually able to break down his therapists and convince them to go get this guy and his team to come get the Maker out. So the Maker recruited them, they recruited the team, and now the team is here before the Maker. But just before the Maker elaborates on that topic, he politely asks that these guys remove their masks, and the Maker goes on to let them know that each of them were carefully selected by his flock, or in other words, the therapist. But as the Maker goes on to say that his flock carefully selected this team, they examined their profiles and their genetics, he then stops mid-sentence and he's like, wait a minute, who's this guy? To where then the dude introduces himself as Jackson, and he's the last minute new guy that we've been talking about this whole time. But as it turns out, the people that the Maker's flock had selected, they were all rounded up and kept in a safe house, but then one of them freaked out, left the safe house, and died in a car accident an hour later, which was likely the flock's doing. But with hearing this, the Maker lets them know that the genetic sequencing was planned for the original 4, with each and every ingredient being what makes for a good soup. But with the Maker having a lot of time on his hands lately, he already planned for the overlap, and he says that this will create a less than 1% anomaly that most people wouldn't even notice. And in response, the guy's like, man, it was the last minute, he did the best he could do. And this causes the Maker to elaborate a bit more on his therapist, and really just one of them in particular, because one of his therapists encouraged him and challenged him to be a better man with better goals, which in a way is like us getting the heads up on the Maker taking his game to the next level. And with him saying this, he activates the device that he'd been setting up this whole time. And as it turns out, this thing fuses the whole team together in a very painful and grotesque metamorphosis, which compiles the 4 of these people into a double of the Maker, just without the scar and a lot more drool. Because again, the Maker doesn't want anyone to notice that he's gone, at least not until the first stage of his plan is complete. And after this, we then jump forward to what is about 4 weeks ago. So roughly a week and a half, 2 weeks since the Maker's escape. And it's here we find both Reed and T'Challa, who have been investigating this for some time now. And I gotta say, I really like seeing the 2 of these guys here. And not just because how close the 2 of them are, with the 2 of these guys forming a brotherly bond over the course of decades, but also with seeing these guys come here and investigate this together. It immediately reminds me of the conclusion of the 2015 Secret Wars event. Because most of the time when I talk to someone about the 2015 Secret Wars event, I often hear how Reed Richards had just saved the day, as if he had done it all on his own. But for me, looking back, I'll always see that conclusion as one of the greatest team-ups between T'Challa and Reed, because when the Maker asked Reed to unleash his secret plans, Reed told him, actually, they're not my plans at all, which then took us to how T'Challa was going to raise this army of the dead, who would follow him because he's the king of the dead. And again, oftentimes when I have a conversation about Secret Wars, I feel like this is the part that doesn't get the amount of attention that it should. And I say this because I don't think I've ever mentioned it on the channel before, but back at the time when I covered the conclusion of Secret Wars, like 6 or 7 years ago, I very intentionally made that a Black Panther video, because everywhere I turned, the conversation was very one-sided. And that's not to take anything away from Reed. He needed to go after the Molecule Man. They needed to take the power of the Beyonders that Doom had stole. But for me, looking back, I can't help but to see the conclusion of that story as anything else but Reed and T'Challa saving the universe. And I mean, of course, T'Challa birthing the intergalactic empire of Wakanda. But that's enough of my 2015 Secret Wars rant. I got a link down below if you want to take a trip down memory lane, watch the video, and hear what I sounded like before puberty, and also see how that story went into the intergalactic empire of Wakanda. But getting back on track, I had to get that off my chest, because I talked to some people and they act like T'Challa wasn't there. But at this point for Reed, he's expressing how he's trying to put this whole thing together in his mind. He's seen the footage, he's seen the explosion, the different buildings coming down, and for him, looking at this and trying to reverse engineer what happened, he describes it like he's trying to solve a puzzle that hasn't been presented yet. And T'Challa tells him that he knows if Reed really wanted to, he could come up with a way to get the answers that nobody wants to give them. But for Reed, he tells T'Challa that recently he's been trying to do better. He's trying to show some restraint and not dance in the morally gray area like he has in the past. And with hearing this, T'Challa's like, well, how's that going for you? And Reed is just like, not well. But then T'Challa discovers by way of one of his contacts that this building was holding a secret damage control node, which right away causes Reed to realize why he was getting all the pushback and who this node is supposed to be for. So when they find it and they make their way inside, there's a brief moment of relief with them seeing the Maker here, but even still, Reed is suspicious. So he gets closer and he says, "Are you really Reed?" And the thing just says, "If you can't tell by now, could you ever?" As it just falls back apart into a huge puddle of filthy McNasty. But now this is what the Maker wanted Reed to see. This is the moment when he wanted him to know that he'd escaped. And for Reed, he's not as worried about where the Maker is as he is worried about what the Maker's doing and why. Because it's here where the puzzle begins, and Reed is weeks behind. So then next we jump forward another week, where we find the Maker at the Baxter building, where he's able to just walk straight in, because to every security measure, and even to Reed's own son, Franklin, the Maker is Reed Richards. And he strolls in with no issue. File scans are checking out, not as much as an eyebrow is raised. And in this moment, though we're not told exactly what it is that the Maker is looking at, we'll circle back to this in a little bit. But before we do, we first head over to the Necropolis, where we find that this threat has been taken very serious, because we find Reed sharing this surveillance footage with the Illuminati, and the original members at that. And I like to think that they also gave Captain America an invitation, but unfortunately it slipped his mind. Okay, bad joke, but either way. While they're all here, we discover that the Maker's been busy paying everyone a visit over these past few weeks, with him going to Wakanda and stealing vibranium from T'Challa, He stole Terrigen spheres from Black Bolt. He takes Reed's bridge, which oddly enough was sitting in a Stark warehouse, but I believe it was there because prior to that, Otto Octavius had borrowed it during the events of Devil's Reign for his Superior 4 spinoff. And I mean, it's possible that Tony may have taken it to borrow some of Reed's ideas back when he was working on Project Arc, but this just kind of brushes through and it doesn't really go into that. And I'm sure Tony's glad about it. But then after this, we then see that the Maker had taken the Krakoan Gate, which is supposed to be unmovable and otherwise useless to someone without a mutant gene. But nonetheless, the Maker was like, I need this. And then next we find that he went to the Sanctum Sanctorum and snatched up an immunity lance. He went to Atlantis and stole some dilution shields, but amongst all of these items that he stole, the Illuminati aren't sure what exactly he's working on. And the thing that makes it even more confusing is the fact that he went out of his way to grab this list of items where many of which seem redundant. And even though at this point, with the Illuminati not being sure of what exactly the Maker is making or doing, Tony and T'Challa put together the idea that the Maker definitely wants all of their attention, with each item having a unique signature, which will eventually lead them all to him. But before that happens, later that same day, we find that the Maker has taken a little trip to Brooklyn, where he's paying a visit to Miles Morales, which is something that I didn't expect at all. But with how it's done, I'm glad to see it, because initially when the Maker shows up, Miles is like, dude, who are you? And the Maker goes on to say that the two of them are brothers, but then he goes on to tell Miles that he had read someone's records about some trick of universal rebirth and reality shaping, and really it's here where I believe that the Maker's referring to his recent trip to the Baxter building, because it sounds like he went through 616 Reed's records, with the Maker wanting to know everything that happened after Molecule Man cut him into little pieces, as well as any other details that he could find as far as personal notes made by 616 Reed Richards, with him composing, if you will, the collaboration between Owen Reese, the Molecule Man, and his son Franklin Richards to restore their universe as well as others and distribute them to their respective realities. And I say this because I believe that the Maker went through Reed's records for reasons that stretch far beyond him just having the curiosity, but we'll talk more on that in a little bit. But as the Maker goes on to tell Miles about him reading through the quote-unquote secret history, he goes on to tell Miles that the two of them have something that sets them apart from any creature on this planet or in this universe for that matter, because they are the only two survivors of a dead universe. And I gotta say, like right there, this makes me want to go on another tangent, because at this point it almost seems intentional. Because it's been some years and nobody's talking about James Hudson Jr., the son of 1610 Wolverine. And I want to know why. Because he also originated from the 1610 universe and made his way over to Earth 616. He joined X-Men Blue for a while. James Hudson Jr. has been here for a minute. And at one point he even fought Daken, the son of 616 Wolverine. And Daken we've seen plenty of recently. He's been on Krakoa, a couple years back he joined X Factor. Daken's getting plenty of shine. But James, he's getting treated like a stepchild from an alternate reality. Because since he met the younger, time-displaced X-Men team and fell in love with the young Marvel girl, only to find that she's still in love with young Scott, this broke my man's heart. And as far as I know, at this point, in 2023, after the Venomized event that went down back in 2018, in X-Men Blue, Jean let James down easy and she told him that she'd only seen him as a friend, to where then he had taken off, needing time to figure things out, and then a few issues later he popped back up to stop Sebastian Shaw from attacking Jean and Scott. But that was it. That was the last we seen him, with him more or less expressing that he's gonna leave Jean alone, he respects her decision, and he's just gonna leave it at that. But yeah, that's enough ranting on James Hudson Jr. If any of you guys want to recap or just follow his entire journey, I got you covered there too. But yeah, I gotta admit, when the Maker said this to Miles, the first thing that jumped in my mind was,
you sure about that?
But with the Maker coming here to see Miles, he's come to let him know that he's going back to their home universe. And at first Miles doesn't believe him, but he then quickly comes to realize that the Maker's serious, and he tells Miles that he came here to ask because it would have felt wrong to go without inviting Miles to come along. And for the Maker, if things were the other way around, he would have wanted this invitation as well. But then Miles just looks at him and he's like, nah, I'm good. And when I first read this, I laughed so hard. Because in the 1610 universe, life was terrible for Miles, and even though it's not perfect here on Earth 616, in comparison, he's much better off here. But even with Miles declining his offer, the Maker gives Miles a card that appears to be blank, and he tells him to take it in case he changes his mind, which right there has me thinking this card's gonna be pretty useful in the future. But just after this, the maker leaves, to where next we find him being confronted by the Illuminati. But even with them catching up with the maker at this point, again, this is what the maker wanted, because with Reed yelling that he's not gonna get away with this and they're gonna stop him, the maker's more or less like, I doubt that. Because he set his course and made sure that as soon as he passes through the bridge, it'll randomize so he can't be followed. And to decode it, it'll literally take years, probably even decades. But before the maker steps through the gate, he tells them that he's going someplace he can call his own, someplace he can create as was intended at his creation. And with him saying this right there, Reed knows what's happening. So he tells the Illuminati that they've got to stop him now while they can. So right away, all of them just unleash on the maker, but with everything that they throw at this shield, it does nothing. To where then the maker's just like, y'all finished? Like, is we finished or is we done? But then as the maker steps through the gate, he tells Reed why he had orchestrated this whole puzzle to make sure that Reed would find him just before he went through the gate, and he asked Reed, letting him know that he's always wondered if Reed could do it again. Would he erase him from existence? And for hearing this, Reed, he takes a second, but he responds by saying yes. And before the maker steps through the gate, he says, I'll keep that in mind. And now with the maker gone, the Illuminati is just sitting there with no clue of where the maker went or what he's up to. But as we continue into the epilogue, we find ourselves on a school trip with Peter Parker and Liz Allen in what appears to be the 1610 universe. And lucky for us, we arrive at the moment where Peter's life is about to be changed forever, as he's about to be bitten by a radioactive spider. But then nope, this event is prevented by the maker, with him stopping this Peter Parker from becoming Spider-Man. But with the way that this is done and it appearing to be Earth 1610, the bomb is dropped on us that this is actually Earth 6160, with the maker taking the events of this reality and changing them in the ways that he sees fit, which is a plan that I'm sure he has a more efficient way of executing on a larger scope. But also with us seeing the maker do this, with the title of this story being Good Artist Copy, and the title of this epilogue being Great Artist Steal, I believe that the maker wants to be what 616 Reed Richards was at the end of 2015 Secret Wars, and the maker wants to take the 1610 universe and make it his own. And who knows how Earth 6160 is gonna look, or even if he wants to stop there. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/DopeSpill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. All right, later.